The
Hello.
mics are on. Oh my gosh, they're very loud. Any Danny Elfman fans here?
Thank you.
This is Danny here. I'm Jeff Bond. I wrote the book on Danny Elfman, not his bios, which apparently he handles. But
That's a in-joke that he's referring to. About how I
Always great
lied
for an
my way
audience.
through many bios over many years.
this is
made
why
up
people
stories.
believe he's from Texas,
Exactly.
which is not true. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles,
Yeah.
see? So we're going to talk about Dark Shadows. And do we have any Dark Shadows fans here? All right. So we're going to try to bring these two disparate groups together over the course of this evening. Now, I have not, like many of you, I have not seen Dark Shadows, but I've heard the music that Danny wrote for the film. And I think for a lot of people who've seen the trailer for this film, they might get the impression that it's an all-out comedy. If you listen to your music, it's a really powerful, creepy horror score. So maybe you can dispel or give us a clear view of what we might expect from the film. Is it more of a horror movie, more of a comedy, or how does that affect your music?
It's more of a comedy, but you know the way Tim normally likes to play comedy is to play it straight, and but there is quite a bit of melodrama. So the first 8.5 minutes of the movie is a prologue, which is extremely melodramatic. I mean, people, suicides off of the and the setup for it. So, in other words, it's not comedy in the sense of like, we're not talking about Judd Apatow. It's not that kind of comedy. It's comedy through Tim Burton lens of very quirky characters. And the comedic part of the story, of course, is Barnabas Collins returning 200 years later to 1972. When we see him in the past, it's not funny. And when we see other people's past, he's dealing with it very dramatically and seriously. But the interfacing of this 18th century character in 1972, of course, lends itself to a lot of ridiculous situations, which Tim has a lot of delight in.
So when you start looking at this film, what was something that you keyed in on that kicked off your ideas for the music?
Well, I don't know. I just look at the movie and come up with ideas. I knew very soon that obviously people thrusting, being suicides and murders off of cliffs, that would all be very dramatic. The music. What I didn't know is what the other part of the film would be, and Tim was pretty specific that he wanted to keep it small, and so we talked about certain references and. One of them was a movie called Legend of Hell House, which we both really liked the score for. It was all electronic. The other was, the Hammer horror films that we grew up in. And, of course, the original music to the Dark Shadows TV show, which I didn't know. But Tim sent me 2 or 3 cuts from, and I really, really liked it. I believe his name was Colbert.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting music. So I actually took a few elements from there and incorporated it into the score. Gave him credit, too, in the cue sheets. But the idea of using the vibes and the bass flute and the bass clarinet as solo instruments for a lot of the score came from the inspiration of the original TV music.
Now, I know that obviously you're a fan of horror, and that was something that was a big inspiration for you growing up. So, but you were not aware of Dark Shadows growing up. Did you have any exposure to the original series?
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Uh-oh.
I remember when it came on. Now, the difference between, because I was just watching Tim Burton and Johnny Depp talking about how much they were fans of it, but I also realized that they were fans of reruns, because Johnny's 10 years younger than me, so when he was 13 or whatever, 14, he would have been watching reruns. So they were much deeper into the mythology and probably better stuff to look at. When I started watching it, it was just out. And it was like, oh, a gothic, there's vampires, but there was no blood. So I tuned it in 2-3 weeks in a row. I ran home, I was very excited, and there's no blood. And for me, if there's no blood, there's no entertainment, and there's no entertainment, I'm not going to watch anymore. It was romantic, and for me, at 14 years old, romance was the absolute antithesis of anything I ever wanted to see on the screen. I lived around the block from the Baldwin Hills movie theater right on, well, it's just off of La Cienega and the Coliseum there, and it's now a bank. But that was my church, and where I worshipped every weekend. And so for me, it was all about, the horror movies. And so I just have to say, I feel bad that I wasn't more of a fan of the original Dark Shadows, but romance is not what 13, 14-year-old boys in that period wanted to see. We wanted to see vampires sucking blood, and copious quantities, hopefully, and in the most gory fashion possible. So it just, at that point, at least, it wasn't yet that. So I've come to appreciate it now as an adult looking back. In fact, I watched a bunch of episodes in the Dark Shadows movie on the plane when I first went out to talk with him about it, and kind of got caught up as well. And so, but at the time, unfortunately, just didn't have enough gore.
Now, you've scored about every genre of film, but as a horror fan, do you get more of a kick out of scoring horror films? You've done The Wolfman, you haven't done a huge number.
Yeah, I haven't really done any horror films. I mean, Wolfman, I scored it as a romance. It was really, the score was a very romantic score, as is Dark Shadows is more of a dark romance, and they're both actually related on many levels. Tragic romance is what those scores, the melodies of those scores are about tragic, doomed characters. And so neither one is really a horror film. There's a bit of horror in Wolfman, and there's some action stuff there was, but what I loved about doing it was doomed romance is what I love writing for. Doomed characters they're fun.
How about Nightbreed? Would you say, is there any film you scored that you'd say was a straight horror film?
I guess Nightbreed would probably be the closest, but I just haven't gotten the opportunity, and most horror films out there don't require much score. You're really doing a lot of tension. And probably the two things that are the most boring for me as a composer is, well, the one genre that I simply can't do at all is romantic comedy. I just don't know what to do with them. I did a few early on in my career, and it almost made me suicidal. Because if it's contemporary characters in a modern romance, I just have no idea what music would possibly or could possibly play for them. There's nothing that I have in my repertoire that relates to that. But the other, oddly, is horror, because most horror films just wants long, suspenseful chords, and those are the things you can write in your sleep. It's really, really easy to write a long cue, building with dissonant strings, leading up to the big shock scare sound that's going to end it. So if that's what it is, I mean, it might be fun to watch, but it's not something I'm like crazy about wanting to do, because it's boring. Now, obviously, there's been good horror films, and some that I'd look at that I would love to do. If Guillermo del Toro ever calls me, on a real horror film that he's doing, of course I would say yes in a quick second, because it would be really interesting. It would probably have a great score. But as a genre, it's not one that I go after for that reason, because so many of the scores for so many horror films are so interchangeable.
Let's talk a little bit about the character of Barnabas Collins in this film, and how Johnny Depp portrays him. And you've obviously worked with Tim Burton on a number of films, and because of that, you wound up scoring a number of films that feature Johnny Depp, and you know him personally. So how do you sort of react to him, in particular in this film? Do you score from the point of view of character when you're working on a film like this?
I don't know. I mean, for me, it's fun watching Johnny grow. It's interesting that Sunday I did a concert at Royce Hall where they were playing live music from Edward Scissorhands, and they did live in sync to a couple of scenes. And hearing Johnny talk then, as opposed to last night while I was at the premiere of Dark Shadows, I was just noticing how wonderfully he's matured his voice. I mean, he's really developed a beautiful, rich voice that he didn't have. And in fact, just also the other night I was watching a little bit of him in Gilbert Grape, and God, he sounded like a kid. And that was 19 years ago, but he developed this richness of his voice. It doesn't just happen. And so that's kind of remarkable, because his voice as Barnabas and his last few characters and his voice in Sweeney Todd, it's really a beautiful voice.
Yeah. What do you guys have in common besides Tim Burton? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, he used to steal guitar picks from my road cases. When Oingo Boingo was rehearsing, we used to hire out a rehearsal space, and they used to rent a little room with his band in the same space, and they were like broke, and they would steal strings and picks from our cases. He confessed to me later.
Really?
Yeah.
So this was before you guys worked together at all?
Oh, yeah, way before
stealing
we worked
from you.
together.
Awesome. Has he ever made, recompense for that?
No, never has. He's completely
you can hold
unrepentant.
that over him.
I know, I do.
You've done now 14 films with Tim Burton.
Well, 14 and a half. I mean, I'm in the
You're
middle
on
of Frankenweenie
Frankenweenie.
now, so
Frankenweenie.
number 15.
Any Frankenweenie fans in the audience? What would you say has kept that relationship going for so long? And when you met him, did you get a sense that you guys had some, shared core values that might work for a long-lasting working relationship like this?
Well, we grew up on the same movies, for sure. I mean, we were both movie nerd kids and saw all the same horror films. So when we met, and I learned that Vincent Price was his idol and Peter Lorre was mine, and that kind of defined our relationship for the next 26 years, because as you know, Vincent Price was always the sadistic master, and Peter Lorre was always the tortured one. And that kind of defines us for a quarter century now.
I think that's something people would probably assume. Well, they worked together for 25 years; they must agree on everything, and it's awesome and an easy thing to go to work with it. But you guys actually disagree about things, and it's
not disagreeing. Sometimes it can be torturous trying to figure out to help him find the journey of what kind of music will work for him in his film. So it's not about arguing or disagreeing over a piece of music, because we've actually never done that. But finding it can be really torturous sometimes, because start out when his movies, it's just not obvious what to play. A lot of experimenting, and he doesn't often know how he feels about it until I'm into the process and really working on the music, and then he begins to develop his own sense of what he needs the music to do. So sometimes it's easier than others.
So what was the toughest with him to do?
Well, I mean, like Big Fish was surprisingly tough. I did a lot of music trying to find what the heart of that one was. Dark Shadows was really difficult. Alice in Wonderland was tough, surprisingly. And so you just never know. Movie to movie, I never know what to expect. Sometimes they're just really easy. Edward Scissorhands, was just real easy. The first thing I thought of. And same with Mars Attacks. I actually heard the whole theme in my head while I was watching a rough cut of the film with just an animatic of the opening titles.
the Affleck duck in the audience?
Animatic would just be like a really crude 2D rendering of the way it's going to look in the future. But all I needed to see was that, and I had to have him stop the screening. And I went out with the tape recorder and made a bunch of notes really, really quickly, because I had the whole thing in my head. I didn't want to forget it. So that was about the easiest. And I would say Big Fish was probably the hardest.
Is there something you see in every one of his films that is consistent, that appeals to you?
Well, I mean, no, there's always something different. I mean, when there is a villain, he loves his villains. And I love to write music for the villains, because the villains are always the more interesting people. Or the anti-heroes, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't really know. He writes interesting. I mean, he directs interesting things, and so interesting things are more interesting to put music to. And he usually gives me a very long leash in terms of like what he'll allow me to do. Some directors won't let you do music that's just kind of will seem too weird to them, and it's hard to write stuff that's too weird for Tim.
There's a that's true. I saw about 25 minutes of Frankenweenie actually last week, and there's a great Peter Lorre character in Frankenweenie.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of his name. Anyhow, Victor, who's the little boy and the hero of the movie, he goes to elementary school, or I guess it's middle or elementary. It's hard to even tell. But he's got a really weird bunch of classmates, and one of them is a little hunchback.
There's
who has a Peter
it's like an
Lorre-like
8-year-old Peter Lorre.
8-year-old Peter Lorre.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. And there's another one that is like a little 9-year-old Boris Karloff. So they're all kind of in his class. All of his classmates are kind of like that.
So how far along are you on that score? And I mean, are you gonna? I don't know if you're gonna write specific Peter Lorre music for that character, but
no, not at all.
If there is such a thing,
I don't actually ever. I try never to write music for the characters if I can avoid it. With a few exceptions.
What would you say? It's a fantastic looking film. It's stop motion, which is another thing that you grew
black
up
and white
as a fan
3D
of.
stop motion.
Yeah,
the first, last ever in the history.
Yeah, that's what everyone has said. The first and last.
Black and white 3D stop motion animation.
So how does that process of scoring stop motion differ for you? Does it at all? Do you get to see everything?
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference whether it's live or animated to me. Same exact thing. Story's the story.
But do you have an idea what direction you're gonna go in with Frankenweenie?
Well, yeah, I've already written about half the
written?
score.
What's
yeah.
it like? Because I heard the temporary music, which you probably never heard.
Yeah, I have to hear it.
You do get to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain point where I'm watching a playback of the movie and I have to listen to it. I don't like to, but I usually have to hear it at least once. And I don't know what it's like. It's just a score.
Are you going to feature any instruments specifically?
No.
Is it just going to be
no
orchestra? Okay, nothing interesting about this one.
Nothing interesting here, folks. You can all go home.
You've talked about how many people here know who Bernard Herrmann is? Good. You've talked frequently about loving his music growing up and that he's an influence on you. Can you talk about him to like the people who might not know who he is and what kind of impression he made on you?
Well, he's a composer that I discovered 2 different times in my life and was my big inspiration because when I was about 12, I saw The Day the Earth Stood Still, and it was the first time I was aware of film music because up to that point I just assumed the music was just in there, like the film just came made with the music. And suddenly I was aware of the fact that the music wasn't just something that came delivered with the film, that somebody created it. And it moved me, and so I noticed his name, and then every time I saw Herrmann, I would know there'd be something special, because then there was the Jason and the Argonauts and Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and these were like my favorite movies growing up, and they'd all have these Bernard Herrmann scores, and they were different. Something set them apart. And then later, when I became more like a film buff, when I was 17, 18, 19, then I started going to the repertory houses and seeing all of Hitchcock's movies amongst everything else. And suddenly, oh my God, there's Bernard Herrmann, the other side, Vertigo and Psycho, which I wasn't allowed to see when it came out. I was too young. And North by Northwest and, these incredible scores. So it's like, there he was again. And now my new favorite movies were Alfred Hitchcock movies. And so he was like there both times. And I think the reason I became a fan of film music was because of Herrmann.
And you got to adapt Psycho in the remake of that movie. What was
I
that
didn't
like?
really do much of anything. I just tried to not touch it. All I did was make tiny little edits here and there. But I didn't want Bernard Herrmann's ghost walking into my room because he was famously cranky, and I just imagine him at the foot of my bed in the middle of the night going, "You asshole! What'd you do to my great score?" And so I tried to be. I really handled the music as if it were like Holy Scripture. I really did. So I didn't want to really change it.
Now, you were in a rock band for many years. You're performing in front of screaming crowds. At what point did you start thinking that film scoring would be something you'd be interested in doing? And how do you sort of transition away from being a rock star? I would think, like most people, that would be a dream job. They would want to have, thousands of fans screaming at them as opposed to being in the room writing music.
Well, I never thought about it. I mean, being in a rock band was already my second career. I was in a theater group for 8 years. And that was my life. And then, so suddenly I was in a rock band, and then I hadn't thought about scoring a film until Tim Burton asked me to score Pee-wee. I mean, doing like a real score. I'd done with the Mystic Knights, the predecessor to Oingo Boingo. There were 12 of us, and we did the score for my brother's film Forbidden Zone. And so it's just weird how one thing leads to another, because Paul Rubens was a big fan. That's Pee Wee Herrmann, by the way. He's a big fan of Forbidden Zone, and Tim used to come see the band, Oingo Boingo. So my name came up on their list, but for two different reasons. And so when they called me in to meet on Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I assumed they wanted songs. I just figured that's why you call someone like me is to write songs. And he said he wanted a score, and I really did ask him outright. I said, why me? And he showed me the movie, and I went and I wrote a demo. I did a piece of music on an 8-track tape player and played all the parts and sent a cassette tape. And didn't think twice about it. Figured I'd never hear from them again. And I got a call about 2 weeks later, and I'd been hired. And I seriously, for a night, considered not taking the job. And I actually told my manager at that time, said, tell him I can't do it. And he said, why? He says, I don't want to fuck up their movie. I don't know how to score a film. And he said, I've been working on this for 2 weeks. You call him and tell him. Here's the number. And I really thought about it, and then I think I just didn't have the nerve to make the phone call, which is how I became a film composer.
So what is it about writing for film that's more fun to you than being in a rock band?
It's not more fun. Who said it's fun?
What's your favorite part about writing for film?
Thinking about it before I start and when it's all done. Everything in between is not fun.
It's not fun.
It's really hard work.
So what keeps you going? What drives you to do it?
Well, there's always the thought of the next score, and the one that will be like really interesting to be able to like get my teeth into, because there are moments where I feel like I'm really deep in the work, and I think even though it's hard, I really enjoy that. And they're not all like that, but I'm always like looking for something that'll let me get my teeth into it. But it's not about fun. I mean, I didn't choose even to be a performer. It just kind of happened. And I didn't choose to be a composer. It just kind of happened. But I figured after doing 2 or 3 films that I was starting to really get the hang of it. And I felt like I could do it. And then by the time I got to my 5th film, which was Beetlejuice, it's like, well, that was really fun now. Because, Pee-wee was really, I had a good time doing it. It was interesting. And then the next 4 were just kind of rough going. And then Beetlejuice, and it's like, I had a great time. That was really interesting. I got to really do some stuff. And then the next 4 were a little more difficult, but starting to get more interesting now. Because in the beginning, when I did Pee-wee's Big Adventure, they only offered me comedies, wacky comedies. There was no quirky comedy made in Hollywood that didn't come by me. And like I said, I didn't really know what to do sometimes. So I thought, this is going to be limited. But each Burton film opened up more doors. So Beetlejuice, now I'm offered fantasy films. So, okay, that's getting more interesting now. And then my 10th film was Batman. And Tim asked me, he said, how come you're doing like 4 films between each of my films? Like, what's going on? And I said, well, that's the only reason, that's how I'm learning how to do this stuff, so I can do your next film. So I couldn't have done Beetlejuice if I hadn't done 4 in between, and I couldn't have done Batman if I hadn't done 4 again in between. I barely pulled that one off. And didn't quite make Edward Scissorhands' number 15. It was the number 14. But it was more or less averaging every 5th film was Tim's, and I was learning as much as I could in between.
You took a big trip to Africa, Northern Africa, right? When you were very young and you started collecting African percussion instruments. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you got interested in collecting those instruments?
Well, again, that was an accident. I had loved traveling, and I had planned traveling around the world. And I saved every penny I could and was going to like try to travel for $1 a day kind of travel, back. I was 18 years old. And I had a plan with a friend of mine from high school, and I actually got out 6 months early from high school to take this trip. But I didn't intend on doing it all in Africa. It was an accident. I was going to go through North Africa and then through India and Asia and work my way back to Los Angeles. But everything's been a series of accidents. I got to Paris. My brother was working in a theater troupe there, and I'd only just picked up my first instrument, because in high school, a lot of people don't know that I didn't play instruments as a child. I didn't take music lessons, and I hung around with musicians in high school. And so, but I was the non-musician in that group, so I secretly picked up violin, so I wanted to learn the fiddle, and I took it to Africa with me. And during that year I practiced, but when I got to Paris with my brother, before that trip, the director heard me practicing one day. I'd only been playing for 4 months, and he hired me. And so I toured with a troupe called Le Grand Magic Circus throughout France as an 18-year-old, playing in this crazy theatrical musical troupe. And that's where I got my first taste of performing. And then when I was done with that, somebody in the troupe said, "Oh, you should visit somebody I know in Canary Islands." Next thing I know, I'm on my way to the Canary Islands, which I'd never even heard of when I left on this trip. When I was in Canary Islands, I saw this great fetish art, and they say, "Oh, these all come from Mali." We go to this place called Mali, Bamako, Mali. And I became infatuated with Mali. Now, again, Mali was not on my agenda, and I'd never heard of the country before. The next thing I know, I was on a boat from Mauritania in the north of Sahara trying to get to Mali, which I did, and I spent time there, and it was fantastic. And I began to listen to and play balafons. That's the kind of West African xylophone. And I started collecting them and sending them home, and I started to work my way down the coast through Central Africa, finally over to Kenya and Uganda. But it took almost a year, and by the time I got there, I wasn't going on to Asia or anywhere else. I was like, I'd had malaria 3 times. I had my life saved by a German doctor somewhere in either northern Senegal or Gambia. I really was going after about a week of some illness really terribly, and a doctor happened to come through this village, and he had penicillin. And I remember like all the little kids were like leading him to where I was staying and saying, "He's the sick, traveler," and he gave me a huge injection of penicillin, and that saved my life. I'm sure of it. And so between all that, by the time I finally got to Nairobi, I also was diagnosed with hepatitis, and I said, "I'm ready to go home."
And you spent all your money on shipping. I mean, that's why I was sort of imagining you having some giant cargo truck behind you with all these drums.
I had like $1,800 to spend, and I came home with extra money. I mean, on that kind of traveling, there's no way to spend money. Your meals are like the equivalent of 20 cents, and you don't spend more than $1 a night in a room that's like the equivalent of what we'd look at as a prison cell, just a room with a bare bulb. And traveling is all in the back of trucks, jam-packed with people and goats, and it's not like you can blow a lot of money when you're living like that. And so picking up some instruments and then getting them to like I'd take them, to wherever there was a coast, and shipping dock, and take it to, and they'd package it up and send it off. I mean, sending off these huge balafons must have cost $75 or something. So it wasn't that big a deal. And I went back 5 years later to Mali again and brought back a lot more.
So what's the biggest, weirdest percussion instrument you got out of that?
Really just a lot of balafons. And I really loved playing the balophone.
And have you used those? Have you gotten to use those on your scores?
Well, no. I mean, they don't last forever. They're not meant to last. We built in Oingo Boingo a lot of, actually it was in the Mystic Nights, and then we used them in Oingo Boingo. But we built a whole section of balaphones that we could, had metal frames so we could fold them up and take them on the road. Because these instruments are very delicate. There's gourds, underneath bamboo frames. And you can only take them around so many times before they start to come apart. So they're just not meant to throw into a packing crates and take on tour. So we built our own, and we used them a lot. We used them on our records, the balaphones. We played them on stage.
So what do you miss about performing, or do you miss anything about performing?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. The nights where I felt really on were great nights. I think I miss most being at the Whiskey Go-Go and the clubs, where it was real close and hot and sweaty. I think that's what I really enjoyed the most about it. But I was never cut out to be a performer for the rest of my life because I couldn't bear touring. And so I loved playing, but I hated touring. So it's a problem. When you're in a band, that's a problem. It's not a good combination.
But you went all around Africa, so what do you hate about touring?
Because we had to play the same things every night.
Okay.
When you're on a tour in a band, you have to do repetition, and that, for me, was a killer. I started to hate my own music after I did a song a certain number of times. So, ultimately, you're kind of doomed if that's your psychological makeup. To be in theater or to be in a band, you have to be able to embrace the same thing every night, or if you're in theater, the same lines. I don't know how stage actors do it, and when I see bands like U2 or the Rolling Stones, or I don't know how they do it, because I reached a point where it's like I never wanted to hear one of my own songs again, and I would reach that point fairly quickly, so I was kind of doomed, for that to be my life.
So how do you feel about taking questions from an audience?
I'd love to.
We're doing that, right? You're first in line, I guess.
What is your role with Steve Bartek? I see his name on a lot of releases.
Well, when I got Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I said, I'm doing an orchestral score. I'm going to need an orchestrator to help me put this all together. And I didn't know where to turn. And I asked Steve, who was my guitarist in Oingo Boingo, I said, have you ever done orchestration? He goes, no, but I took a class at UCLA. I said, that's good enough. So, he became, my orchestrator, and he still is.
So is he kind of like the third Groffy to Gershwin?
Nice.
I don't know. What was he to Gershwin? But I don't know what he did for Gershwin, because when you're orchestrating for film, I think it's a very different job than when you were orchestrating a piano piece for orchestra for Gershwin, because in that situation, now I could be totally wrong, and I'm the shittiest musical historian on the planet, but my understanding is that the orchestrators in those days were also like arrangers, because they would take an elaborate piece of music written for a few instruments and really turn it into a major work. When you're writing for film, you have to write every piece of music for every instrument and do a demo of it and play it for the director before it's approved. So when Tim Burton hears a piece of music, everything is there. Every woodwind, every brass, every violin part has to be there. It has to be as close to the final thing that it could possibly be. And in the process of doing that, the arrangement is 100% complete. I don't ever want to or expect in the final orchestration to hear a new note or a new harmony that I didn't write. But there is a lot of breaking it down and organization that still has to be done. Steve may decide that I've written a viola line and written under the violins that it's going to get lost and put some bassoons with it. He may elect to throw a piccolo on top of a flurry of French horns that I've written. There's still a lot of color and finishing that has to be done, but his job is essentially to take this work and get it orchestrally to speak as close to that piece that the director has approved as possible, because the other thing we don't want is for the director to go, that sounds different, and they will really fast. So much of my job is actually formulating a reconstruction of the orchestra before the orchestra, and I write that way and I work out all my parts that way. So I would have been kind of hopeless in Gershwin's era, because I can't sit and just write a whole score like Bernard Herrmann did either, on a piece of paper at a piano, which is all he did. He didn't even need the piano. He could just sit there and write it out. And that's an amazing art in itself. Stravinsky was like that too. I'm hearing everything. So I'm definitely a creature of modern times, because I can write dense parts, but I'm hearing everything. I'm hearing all the related. I have it in my head, and I can work it out slowly, because I'm playing every note of every piece of music that goes into the film, all the parts, but I'm able to do it slowly. I don't have to play in real time. I could slow it down to halftime and then play my parts, get them fix the wrong notes because I'm making a lot of mistakes, tediously go through it, and then play it back over and over and over again until finally. I mean, the opening piece for Dark Shadows is 8.5 minutes long, but I think I wrote 23 versions of it before Tim finally approved one for the film. So when you think about it, the amount of writing that went into that one piece of music is enough to do 2 film scores. And so it's a very different art than it might have been, certainly in Bernard Herrmann's day, because Hitchcock didn't even hear Herrmann's music until they got to the scoring stage and it was all done. It's just a very different animal, but also the job of an orchestrator is very different, I believe, than what I imagine Gershwin. I don't know how much of his arrangement and orchestration he actually did, so that's why I could be dead wrong. But I've heard so many different arrangements of Rhapsody in Blue, it makes me wonder that, like, what was the very first thing that he wrote? Can I give a more roundabout answer to a question?
That's one of the best descriptions of how you work I've ever heard. Great question.
Right,
how about
get me going and
you in the purple shirt?
Yes, Mr. Elfman. For the last few years, you've had a very For the last few years, you've had a very excellent working relationship with La La Land Records, with them putting out the extended or complete versions of some of your scores, like the Batman films or the recent Planet of the Apes release. And I was wondering what we could expect from your relationship with them in the future, like more Tim Burton movies or maybe Darkman or even Psycho.
I don't know, because they never actually consult me. I don't actually have a relationship. I only find out about the album when it's released. And I'll go, oh, wow, look, there's an extended score. Cool. So I'm finding out about it pretty much like at the same time you are, and it's always intriguing to me. But I have no idea what they're planning next. It's not going to be Tim Burton work, because the box set, I mined that so deeply. I mean, for that thing, we went through boxes and boxes and boxes of demos for 3 months, trying to find every possible unused take that existed. I mean, nothing went unturned. I was, Melissa, who's here today, where is she? Back there. She personally must have listened to hundreds and hundreds of hours of my old tracks and tapes looking for possibly a take of a piece that hadn't been used, or a different mix or something like that to use in that. So I think that's been mined as thoroughly as it can, but there's 60 other films out there that, you know, who knows, anything's possible. And Melissa, can I have my other glasses? You know, I came out here in sunglasses because I stay light, but now the sun's going down.
This gentleman? Yes, you, sir.
Hi. I was curious if you could explain how you keep it fresh when you're doing the transition from the composing part to the actually tracking part, and how revisions come into the way once you are tracking the film.
Well, keeping it fresh from tracking, meaning the recording?
Yes.
Well, you got to look at it this way. In orchestra, especially, you know, you'll be writing for 10, 11, 12 weeks, and then your recording is 3, 4, 5 days. So it's at the very end. And one of the reasons we do these elaborate demos like we're talking about is so all the interplay between the director and myself is already done. We've already been through it all. By the time it's playing on the scoring stage, it's so expensive to record orchestra. You have to move really, really fast. And you don't want there to be any questions. You know, you want to refine the performance, get it to sound right a little bit. Maybe the director might hear something, have a few comments, but you want 90% of your work with the director to be already finished. So the work is done by the time I get to the scoring stage. By the time I get to the scoring stage, it's just very intensive listening to make sure that no weird shit gets in there, because there is a really awful thing that happens where you get really focused on the French horns are trying to play this very difficult line, and they've blown it 3 times, and on the 4th time they get it, and you're going, yes, like that, but you didn't notice that there's a bad note in the clarinet, because you're like so focused on those horns, and you go, oh my God, and I'm listening to the mix, and going, there's a B flat instead of a B natural in this clarinet. It must be just a mistake, that take. Let's go back, another take. It's there. Go back again. It's there. Oh my God, how is it there this whole time? It's because I was really focusing on something else. So the point is, in the recording, you just have to really listen. It's just like trying to keep your ears. And I don't know how. There's no way to stay fresh. It's really intense. It's very intense. I used to say that the only thing I could think of that was more intense than being on stage for 2 hours with Oingo Boingo is going through like 6 or 7 hours with an orchestra, where I really feel like I've done nothing but sit in one spot, concentrate on the music, and feel like I lost a pound. Probably gray matter.
This woman with the glasses right back here in the corner. Yes.
What advice what advice would you give to someone who's trying to compose music themselves?
That's a really hard one because I'm a really bad example. You know, I generally say don't follow me to anybody because, first off, I would say study and work hard because I think it's better to study than to do it the way I did it, which is falling in and then learning as you go. But secondly, I'm a bad example because the first 10 years, I considered it like an evening job. I had a day job. I was in a band, and I really didn't care what anybody thought of my music. And ultimately, that worked to my advantage. But like when I wrote Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I really expected the score to get thrown out by Warner Brothers. I thought they'd hear it and dump it immediately. And so not caring what anybody thought, other than Tim, for example, worked well for me. But it's hard for me to tell other people, don't give a shit. Just do what you think and don't care what anybody else thinks. It doesn't really work that way. So I don't really have any good advice other than, you know, really, really, really hard work.
And have a day job.
Doesn't hurt.
You are actually with the glasses right past this. Yes, you.
I notice in a lot of your scores, like Batman and Batman Returns, you use the organ a lot. Now, what made you use such a complex instrument? I mean, Mozart called it the king of instruments, and it's not something that is normally heard in a film score. What made you come up with that?
There was no reason. It was just like, you know, I wanted a big dark color, and Bernard Herrmann used the organ really effectively a number of times. And so it's kind of like whatever Herrmann did was immediately like, that's good for Herrmann, it's good for me. So I think, you know, often when I'm doing stuff, I'm invoking moments of Bernard Herrmann, and that definitely was the case there.
This gentleman right back there in the black T-shirt? Yes. No, you. Yeah. Sorry. Well, there's two men with black T-shirts.
Oh, thank you. It's a two-part question. I got the music box today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you going to come out with another album of music for a darkened theater?
Well, I mean, there's no plans to do that. I don't know. You know, if somebody asked me to do another compilation, I probably would. It's always kind of painful for me listening to my old stuff. Having put so much work into that box set, I don't think I'd want to do it right away because that was like playing through my whole life. And but maybe like if it was another year goes by and somebody asked, I'd probably think about it.
The other man with the black shirt.
Sorry, second question, real quick. Any talks of a collaboration with Pixar's Dia de los Muertos movie?
No, Pixar has not asked me ever to work with them. So
thank you.
What can I say? Someday. You know that when I used to play gamelan out at Cal Arts, I was bugging that because I did for 3 years. I snuck in there and I played in the Indonesian music department there playing the gamelan. It turned out that the animator across the room being really bugged by all that gamelan music was John Lasseter. And I'm not sure he's ever forgiven me.
One of my favorite scores by you is Standard Operating Procedure. And I was curious if it was intimidating at all, that project, working on that after the amazing partnership between Errol Morris and Philip Glass over the years.
Yeah, it was intimidating because, you know, Philip Glass has made such a humongous imprint, both not only on Errol's films, but documentaries. I mean, there almost can't be documentary music without Philip Glass. So, you know, his music is perfect all the time. It lends itself to that medium so well. So it was really hard starting and trying to neither avoid Philip so much that I'm just doing the anti-Philip score, because I didn't want to do that, but yet I trying to not let myself sound like knockoff Philip Glass. But yet, when you're doing a documentary, you are falling into a repetitive vibe. You have to create music that will go under narration, that will go on and repeat itself for long periods of times, and in a way that at a certain point it's hard to avoid that. So I tried to find a balance. Philip Glass is one of my favorite composers. There's nobody alive right now that I have more admiration for. So I also didn't want to do anything that he would, you know, give me shit for or think that I was like ripping him off. So I really was trying to be sensitive to him and his music, trying to feel like I wasn't ripping him off, but yet I can't say that he wasn't a huge influence.
I'd like to say, too, Philip Glass is a big fan of Danny. And, you know, I talked to him for this book, and I had talked to him many times before, and actually on a couple occasions was trying to get some quotes from him about other composers, which was sort of like pulling teeth. But when I got him talking about Danny, he was very enthusiastic. He's very admiring of Danny's concert work. Or, was really impressed by Serenata Schizophrenia, and really loved
when
that.
he told me
stuff.
that was the highest compliment for me ever, was getting anything, whether it was true or half true or he was just being polite. It felt really good.
You, sir. Yes.
As you've made the shift from writing songs to writing scores, have you felt there's been a major difference in the way that you approach a composition?
Well, yeah. I mean, right from the beginning in Pee-wee, I had to abandon song structure because I didn't really want to do that kind of scoring that felt like it had a verse and a chorus. I really turned backwards to try to think of all the films I'd grown up on, whether it be Herrmann or Franz Waxman or Max Steiner or Nino Rota, who was a big influence, or Morricone, and go, how did they write? So I tried to really abandon the idea that I'd been a songwriter.
You, sir, with the sunglasses.
On Wanted, you released a new original song. Speaking of songs, can we expect something like that in the future? Or was that a one-time thing?
It's just, if a director asks me, I'll do a song. It's just really simple. I have no problem with it. It's just Timur, I'd given him a song, and he was like, no, it's not right. And then, I was in the middle, I was already on another movie. I was with Guillermo on Hellboy, and then Timur calls, says, I want that song. And it's like, oh, great, how do I record this? I'm in London scoring. So I tried to put it together for him, and I was doing the vocals in between recording sessions of Hellboy at Abbey Road. I was recording the score all day, and then I'd go in another room with a microphone and do the vocals. And then he told me he needed it in Russian as well. And that I realized was just pure sadism on Timur's part. But I did it as best I could.
See, if you miss Oingo Boingo, all you had to do is ask him to write a song and be a film director. So, you in the hat, yes.
First off, I just want to say it's an honor to finally meet you, Mr. Elfman. I just want to say that when I first heard the main titles of Beetlejuice and then I Stands from Edward Scissorhands, that's how I knew that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was just wondering your opinion on new sort of programs that musicians use, because as a composer, I use orchestra programs, because obviously when I do any sort of short film, I can't afford an orchestra. Sorry about that. So do you think it's possible to get away with using programs rather than a full-on orchestra to make it sound good?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of composers, there are a lot of scores out there that don't use orchestra that sound really good. A score, there's nothing that says a score needs to have orchestra, but I think if you're going to use orchestra, the real orchestra sounds better than the sampled orchestra. So, I mean, there's a lot of scores I've done where half of what I've laid down on before going into the orchestra stays. And really only the strings, brass, and woodwinds disappear. Everything else I've already done myself. I like using my own samples and my own stuff, but I still can't ever top real brass strings and woodwinds. So even though the sample libraries are getting better, and I think they're suitable, you can't get the nuances out of those instruments yet, and maybe someday they will. But for now, I can still hear the difference usually between a sampled orchestral score. But those work best if the score is not orchestral. Then it's I would say try not to use an orchestra if you're going to do that. But if you have to, I mean, I've done scores and pieces where I've done almost all samples because there was no money. It sounds a little cheesy, but what are you going to do? It's ultimately, as a composers, we just got to do what we got to do.
I've got a few questions from online. I will ask more questions from the audience, but Paul Stefano from Ecuador wants to know if this is your first or second experience scoring a vampire movie.
I don't know. Have I?
Is there any other?
I think so.
First. Beck Warner has two questions, and I don't know where he or she is from. But one of them is, any special rituals you do to get into the composing mindset? Yoga?
No, it's hard, actually, really, sometimes just a shower. It's not such an elaborate thing, but it helps.
And do you think the value of a film score has increased or decreased or stayed the same in modern film, I guess, since you started working?
Well, I think all of those. It's increased and decreased because every year, when I start, at a certain point, I'm going, God, all these scores are just really nothing but supplementing sound effects, and they're all interchangeable. And then a great score will come along, and I go, wow, that was amazing. And then that rattles the whole theory of scores are disappearing. So, it's just like probably no different than any other time. There's just a lot of stuff out there, and the biggest and most commercial films are the least demanding in terms of what goes in there. But then there's always a lot of really interesting stuff somehow manages to get through. And you've got really talented composers like, Alexander Desplat and others out there that are just doing amazing work. So, it keeps going.
And Heather Atkins, if I can discern this, what gives you inspiration for each song for different films? Maybe she means score. And how does music come to you?
I don't know.
I think I can get more specific.
I think that's about as easy as asking a writer or anybody's like, where
What
do you
gives
get your
you
ideas
your
for your
ideas?
stories? Pardon me?
Where do you get your ideas?
I don't know.
That's the classic writer question.
No idea.
Okay, Wu-Tang Clan.
How difficult is it for you to just watch a movie without, thinking of different ways that you would have scored a certain piece?
I mean, if I'm watching another film?
Yes, another film.
Well, it's hard because I'm hearing the score. So if I'm hearing the score, I really can't think simultaneously of like what I would be doing differently. Sometimes I'll see a film that I don't end up working on, and I'll watch it once without score, and I'll have certain thoughts, and then it'll come out, and I'll go, oh, that's completely different than I thought. But it's hard. At the end of the day, I listen to a score in a film, and just like you, I either like it or I don't like it, but I don't necessarily go, I would have done this, or I would have done that. I just usually think, yeah, that was really good, or yeah, that was so-so.
You in the red shirt and beard, right there in the back.
Sorry?
At the. You get
Do I
writer's
get
block.
writer's block? Every time. I could expect writer's block. And the only thing that breaks writer's block is deadlines. As I'd still be working on Pee-wee's Big Adventure if I didn't have to turn it in because of writer's block. So I always get writer's block, and then the deadline eventually forces me to start writing some music. And whether I feel ready or not, I have to do it. And I think that's what, to be a film composer, that's kind of how you have to be wired. You have to be able to work in increments of 4, 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 weeks, and that's all you get.
This woman in the black shirt.
Hi. I was wondering, sorry, behind the speakers over here. I was wondering, since your first time working with Tim Burton on Pee-wee, how has your process changed in the last 14 years with him? And are you superstitious about anything around working with Tim in particular?
It hasn't really changed. He can't really verbally express himself. He generally does it with body language. If I'm playing a piece of music and he's pulling his hair, it's a bad sign. If he just seems to be looking intently, that's a good sign. For 5 years, I lived at Malibu, and he used to come out, and I'd serve him a martini. He would sit and watch the sun go down and then go in. It's like, I figured that was a really good thing, but now he's usually like not taking the martini anymore. But would if I could, I'd always be, at the beach with a martini before listening to music. I found that was very helpful. But it hasn't changed in 26 years, really hasn't.
You right there with the glasses on top of your head.
First of all, big fan. Second of all, do you still use any of your old bandmates for any of your composing to help you come up with new ideas for movies and that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, first off, no one could help me. I wish I had anybody who could help me come up with ideas. If I knew who that was, I would definitely, they'd probably be a slave in my basement or something. But no, I don't. First off, I don't write for guitar, bass, drums a lot. When I do guitar, I actually often am playing bad electric guitar myself, and you're out there all by yourself, dangling in the wind when you're a composer, is my experience. And it's like, we go, who can I call that can offer me an idea right now? But you never find that. I've never found that name in the phone book yet.
You, right there in the dress.
Hi.
Movie score, and what do you feel is your most underrated movie score?
Well, I think Batman's probably my most overrated movie score. I think I did an okay job. I didn't think, at the time I felt like I was just barely hanging on for dear life. And people tell me they think it's really a good score, and I go, all right, I guess. I think it's okay. But I don't think anything is underrated. I don't necessarily think I do a good job every time. And sometimes, people go, if they think they just don't really like a score, I'll go, well, maybe you're right. Maybe it wasn't very good. I don't know. So I'm not sure I have an underrated score. Also, I don't know whether I would know what was a score that everybody hated, because I don't really privy to that information. Pardon me?
Like personally for you, when you feel like, oh, I wish more people noticed this movie score.
Okay, well, yeah, there's movies that come out that are gone in a quick second that I worked really hard on and liked, and they go, oh, I hope people find this music. And certainly amongst them, high up there would be Standard Operating Procedure, because that was a movie that really nobody saw when it came out. And but I was really proud of the work with Errol. I loved working with Errol. He was great. Another one was The Wolfman came out and was gone in like 48 hours. And but again, I really loved working with Joe Johnston. But there was a common link between Joe Johnston on The Wolfman and Errol Morris in Standard Operating Procedure, which is they tried to exert no influence or control. They just said write, and I just got to write. And everything I wrote, they were just like, that's fine, that's great. And really? Yeah, you don't want me to do like 20 more versions? No, it's fine just like it is. So there are pieces that I just felt like I was almost like if I was writing a concert piece for like an orchestral piece, like I wasn't writing for film. Both of those were kind of like I just felt like I was just writing, and it just happened to be going into a film because I was getting no instruction from the director. Not that I wasn't getting instruction, but I was getting no input pulling me in any direction or trying to modulate what I was doing in any way, shape, or form. So it was just kind of like I'm just writing, like when I was writing Serenata Schizophrenic, I just felt like I'm just writing, or the ballet I did for Twyla, which is still unrecorded, which I'm trying to correct if I can in the next year, because I don't feel like a work is done until it's recorded. But so maybe it's the Twyla Tharp ballet, because that's not unrecorded and almost nobody's heard that. So maybe that's the top of the list.
You in the glasses, you held your hand up for a while, yep.
Thank you. I'll look at my notes here. How did the Elfman project get started with the American Youth Symphony? And aside from you being simply the composer of the music, how were you involved in that?
I don't know how it started. I got a call from Richard Kraft, my agent, that Dave Newman, who I knew conducted, was interested in doing it. And I said, I guess. I trust Dave. Dave's a good guy, and he's talented, and he cares about music. Normally, I've avoided doing suites for live playing, because I've been burned a couple of times. I've heard pieces done as suites, and I thought they sounded horrible. And so I've really consciously avoided that. And every year I've been asked, when I'm going to do concert music for symphonies. And I go, I don't want it played in symphonies. What I've heard sounded really wrong. But I think probably I agreed to do it because I trusted Dave Newman. He's both a composer and a film composer and a good conductor, and I just somehow felt that I was in good hands with Dave. So I kind of finally let go, but I had no involvement at all. I just let Dave do what he was going to do.
You in the green shirt.
Here you go. Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
You have a guy who holds up his hand for you?
I'm holding the camera. I can't do both.
All right.
Anyways, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the music. It's like candy for my imagination.
My pleasure.
Second of all, I want to ask if somebody made a biopic about your life, let's presuppose in that world, but you weren't allowed to score it. Somebody else has to do it, but you get to pick the composer. Who would that be?
Bernard Herrmann's Ghost.
He agrees. All right, I guess I'm done. Who's next?
But maybe if he wasn't around, maybe Alexander or Tommy Newman or, one of those guys. Do a good job. Pardon me?
Sure, you did the work of holding up your hand for that guy.
We did The Simpsons. Everyone's here for film scoring, but I know you from The Simpsons. That's where I fell in love with you.
I'm not hearing you.
Oh, I fell in love with you in The Simpsons. Everyone hears about film scoring. You did The Simpsons. You're God. That is awesome. That
was just Simpsons was just a lucky break.
But was it easy? That's my question. Was it a lucky break? Was it easy? Did you do it on a bar napkin?
It was one day of work.
Yes, that's what I wanted to know.
And
internal.
I met with Matt Groening, and he showed me a pencil sketch version of the titles. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "If you want something that's really retro, I'm the guy, like something maybe that a Hanna-Barbera piece that never happened." But I said, "If you want something contemporary, I'm not the guy." He says, "No, retro, let's do something really retro." I had it written in the car before I even got home. I got home, I quickly played the demo piece, sent it in. He says, "Yeah, it's good." That was it. Tightened up a few moments, and we recorded it like a couple of weeks later. It was like literally the quickest thing I've ever done. And I didn't expect anybody to see it because I figured this is so weird. It's one of those things they'll do one season, but they'll only do 3 episodes, and they'll get canceled, and that'll be that.
You with the camera.
You've done a lot of superhero films, all including Spider-Man. And superhero scores have its place among fans and people. What do you think makes the best superhero score, and what do you think about superhero scores today versus yesteryear?
I don't really know. John Williams kind of really established the tone of what makes a big score like that, certainly with Star Wars, and even though it's not a superhero thing, Superman, that was the first kind of superhero movie, wasn't it? Modern superhero movie. But other than that, I don't know. I'm a kind of believe in melody. You use a melody and you kind of make it stick. I'm not going to comment on other people's work in that genre. Some of it's good, some of it I think's okay. But I don't know what makes it work. It's just like any film, just a good score is a good score.
You, yes.
Hi.
My question is, I once heard that somebody asked Aaron Copland why did he stop doing movies. He said because the phone calls had stopped. In this world, we're always changing, especially with dubstep, electronic music, with Skrillex winning 3 Grammys and incorporating it in movies. Now, you're a well-known composer. How do you keep in competition with the young film composers who are coming out today and tomorrow, to the people who are in competition with, like Hans Zimmer and all John Williams, all those people? How do you keep yourself in work? Because that's the number one thing, keeping ourselves, because I'm a film student, film composing. So how do you keep it going without the help of your manager and your agent?
It's a good question. I don't know really if there's a good answer. It's probably why I never take a vacation. I do feel like if I went away for a year, I'd never get another job again. But I think when you're a composer, you just try to work, and you hope every 4 or 5 years you get something that really lets you stand out, and that'll fuel you for another 3 or 4 or 5 years, because every score is not going to stand out, and as much as you want them to and you'd love them to. So I look at my heroes like Jerry Goldsmith and people like that. He reinvented his career a number of times, and just when they thought he was down for the count, he'd come out with Poltergeist, and then he'd come out with
Basic Instinct.
Basic Instinct, which at the point, he's already like history. Basic Instinct, then everybody's doing a score. It sounds like Basic Instinct forever. So, he was lucky enough to get these things. Pure talent, but lucky enough to get the vehicles with which to suddenly he's back, and he's fully vital. And with any of us, we just have to hope every 4 or 5 years that we get one of those that keeps us in the consciousness of directors who are looking for composers. Otherwise, we do lose our place, and I will get steamrolled over, and I expect it to happen every single year. And I'm lucky to be working still. I don't. Thank you, though.
How about the woman in the red shirt holding up your hand way in the back?
We've got a
Maybe wait. Okay. Very good with a microphone there.
What was the most hilarious part while you were composing?
The most hilarious part while I'm composing? Oh.
Or moment?
I don't know if there are really many hilarious parts. I mean, unless you're in the dark comedy where you like, somebody like watching somebody get beaten really badly is funny. Then there's lots of comedy. Because when you're a composer, you feel like beaten up a lot. You've like always taken a beating. And so maybe the trick is just to look at that as kind of dark comedy.
Wait, you already had a question. You can't ask another question. Did you? You haven't? You haven't? Oh, you look familiar. Okay, I'll take your question then.
And then they choreographed on top of it, or what was the inspiration? Because that thing is freaking amazing.
Thank you. That was a really interesting project, and it was both. I wrote a lot of music, just raw ideas for Philippe Decoufflet, who was the director on that early on, and then disappeared, and he started choreographing pieces, and then I came in later, and it's like they had pieces that were using this one and this one and this one and this one, and there was no music was fitting, and I started from scratch, and some I adapted. There was one piece I went in, and they had like a minute and a half that they looped 4 times, and it's like, oh my God, they've been rehearsing this for months, just loop. It was just awful. So I said, I'm sorry, and I went right in and took the first minute and a half, and turned it into like a 7-minute piece, and but it was both. It was both me writing with nothing there, and then them doing stuff and me looking at it and writing to them. So it really was like about a 50-50 thing. The contortionists, I'd written a piece of music, but then I looked at what they did and I rewrote it around their movements, and same with the Kiriki acrobats. And for example, the first piece I wrote for the 2 straps artists in the beginning ended up becoming the trapeze piece. And I wrote a new piece for them because I said, no, it's too delicate, it's too delicate. And the trapeze artist was like, I like it. And so it's like, okay. So it was very collaborative, and I worked very closely with the artists to try to make sure that they had what they felt good with and needed.
And you have another one? I'll give you one more because I apologize for thinking you look familiar. There's a lot of black shirts in this audience. You're not wearing a black shirt. Yes.
Aside from the collaboration that you did with Ego Plum, how much involvement are you going to have in the Forbidden Zone 2 music?
I wasn't aware that I had a collaboration.
The music that they used for Polly's dance, that they had your name on it.
All right.
Let's get the lawyers in here.
Like no, he's my older brother, and if he says that we're collaborating on something, then we're going to collaborate. Then whatever he said, it is. It's fine with me. I don't really know what he's got going or what the nature of that is going to be. Like I said, he's my older brother, and I defer to him there. So older brother's always right.
You in the green shirt there, yes. Microphone.
That you said working on Freeway was a lot of fun because it was the first improvised score that you did.
Well, yeah, that was an exception there. I said it's never fun, but sometimes it is fun. Freeway was fun. I had 3 days to write the score. Wow. And so that's fun. No money, 3 days. Whatever you do, they have to use.
Could you elaborate a little more on
fun.
what it means to do it? Is it just you just improvised with a bunch of guys, or just yourself?
Yeah, well, I came up with ideas at home, and then I brought them in, and then I said, let's just jam on this. And then there was one point where I had everybody switch instruments and do that kind of thing. It was just for fun. It was just like a total, just for the pure pleasure of it. I wasn't getting paid a penny. And sometimes, every now and then, I'll do a freebie. Sometimes for my brother or for Matthew Bright. The director of Freeway was my best friend in high school, by the way. So it was kind of like he was doing a movie. It's like, sure, I'll whoop together some music.
Well, it worked really well.
Thanks.
You, sir, in the corner in the black shirt. Yes, you.
I'll take it. I've been here. Real quickly, I'm going to out my age. The very first compact disc I ever bought was the Batman score. I know you don't like it, but that was my
I
first.
I didn't like it.
But I was so mad because of Bat Dance. I had to wait for the score to come out.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry. I'm not putting it down. I don't mean I don't like it. To me, it was a real struggle. And so at the end of it, I just feel like I survived kind of an ordeal of fire more than created something, I don't know. Some.
I understand what you mean. It was the first purchase I went to a store and bought, and then one of my best friends I've known for 20 years, we met over you and so to speak, and our dream project was you and Tim doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but that was in 1994. We thought that. Wow. So I've been a lifelong fan. So all the good questions have already been asked, but the ones I'll come up with. I heard the Green Hornet theme, and I wish you could have finished it. So that's just I don't know if you want to comment or not, but I just loved it, and I wanted to tell you that.
Well, I didn't write anything for the Green Hornet.
There was a demo that didn't. I thought I heard that anyway.
No. I was slated to work on it, and it was just one of those things where the schedules moved, and it was actually because of Iris that I had to bow out of it, because the point where he moved his schedule was right when after 2 years of work, Iris was coming to fruition, and I had to give them my full attention. And unfortunately, I'm not set up like many composers are in Los Angeles to do 2 movies at the same time, or 2 projects, and I kind of can't. So I reluctantly had to say goodbye to the director, and there was just nothing I could do, because when schedules move.
Then I guess the question is, what was it like working with John Hughes and Rodney Dangerfield? Because I can't think of anything better that I can ask right now. So
John Hughes was very much a gentleman. He was real sweet, and I just did that. Another real easy piece of work was Weird Science. Just talked with him. I wrote it in the car, hung up the phone, and it was like I was all charged up from talking with him, and I thought that was cool, and I just had it and ran home and got it down real quick and real easy. And Rodney Dangerfield, I didn't really work with him. By the time a composer comes on a film, the actors generally kind of are gone. So we had that one moment with Oingo Boingo on stage where we all just kind of met, and Robert Downey Jr. was mixing the sound. He was the sound man who then made the feedback that I had to pretend to hold my ears. And so when I saw him later, he reminded me of that. But I didn't really get to hang out with Rodney. He's a great guy, I'm sure.
We got a couple more online questions. Erica Estrada, no relation, asks, would you rather read a story of a film, a script, a screenplay, I'm assuming, or watch a rough cut before writing the score?
I don't write music from the script. I wait till I see the rough cut. I mean, because I've read scripts and come up with music too many times only to be on the film, and not one single note of my idea survives, because there's so many ways to shoot a script. And depending on the cinematography, the performance, the editing, these are just going to call for completely different scores. So you might think it's going to be one way, and then you see it and you go, oh, that's not what I imagined. It's faster moving, it's a different score, it's raw, or it's very theatrical, and I imagined it being very raw, but it's actually very, very smooth, and now it wants a very different kind of score. So I learned to kind of hold my thoughts back until I see some footage.
And Ashley Klein asked if you could have worked on any film, new or old, that you didn't do, which would it be?
If there was any film that I didn't do, that could do,
that
if I
you would
could
have loved to have done, even before you were born.
No, I mean, the list is endless, I'd kill to do Good, Bad, and the Ugly, or The Godfather, or Lawrence of Arabia, or Citizen Kane, or, these are like amazing musical moments that are just once-in-a-lifetime things. Once Upon a Time in the West. I would love to have done anything with Fellini or Sergio Leone. Any one of Fellini's films, just pick any one, and, but, it's not going to happen.
Richard, are you asking a question? Okay. Sitting down, yes.
I once read that you attended Pitzer College, and is that true? And if not, where did you ever have any formal education or formal training?
No, I never. I snuck into CalArts Indonesian department for a couple of years, but I was never registered there as a student. That's the only. After high school, that's the only thing I ever went back to any schooling for. I never had any education beyond making it through the first half of the 12th grade. And I got my credits and took off.
You, on your toes. Yes. Microphone slowly making its way to you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a huge fan of everything you do. First off, I'm curious about your family life, just in that, because I'm a composer as well, and clearly you have an insanely busy schedule. How do you balance a family life in the middle of all that chaos? And I was also curious just what an average busy film day looks like for you.
Well, I mean, that is a good question for people to be aware of when they get into this business, because you don't get the personal time. And I have a 7-year-old right now, and it's hard to see him while he's awake. So very often, I never see him in the morning because I get up around 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10. I work until pretty much 2 o'clock every morning. I'm very nocturnal. Even though I do a lot of stuff in the day, I get more to work at night. So it's hard. It's really rough. I try to make time at dinner or bedtime to go see him, spend time with him, or tuck him to bed. And other than that, you got to do the best you can, but it's rough. It's not a 9-to-5 job.
No. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You in the beard and glasses?
It means a lot that you took the time to do this.
Well, if there's any one thing that I'm going to take the time to do that I actually do enjoy, it's actually this.
Well, it's the highlight of a lot of our weeks. I just want to know, what do you listen to when you're in the car, when you're home? What's in your CD player?
It's shameful how little new music I listen to. But very often when I'm in the car, I'm listening to CDs I've made of the pieces I'm working on, because I'm still trying to work out a puzzle in my head. And I'm playing one of a dozen fragments of ideas over and over again. I have a place in Santa Barbara, and I drive up and back, and I have a studio there too. And I use that trip to listen to my own stuff I'm working on and try to clarify what it is that's not happening and what's wrong with a theme that feels like it's half cooked and I can't find a B section, that kind of thing. But if I just really want to relax and listen to something, it's going to be, I have Sirius radio, and I listen to the hip hop station a lot, especially on the weekends where there's a lot of DJ action. And if I can, I'll get into that. A lot of ethnic music, stuff that's very much not like what I'm working on. I'd rather listen to gypsy music if I'm not writing and want to hear something than more orchestral music, if that makes any sense. Something really, really different. But the thing that does the most if I'm just going to listen to something else is hip-hop.
I think we got about 5 more minutes. If that's not true, someone let me know or shoot a tranquilizer dart at me or something. But I think we have time for a few more questions. You, sir. Here comes a microphone. It's coming right behind you.
I was just curious, how many instruments can you play now proficiently? And also, since nobody else has asked, although I love the scores and I bet the future ones are going to be the best to come, any chance maybe some Halloween Eve you and the guys will get together? And
No.
Okay.
You had to ask. That's the easiest question of the evening.
Somebody had to ask.
Yeah, I know, but
they did.
It's not going to happen. When it comes to bands, I know that a lot of bands have gotten together and done, whatever. It's but not for me. The dead should stay dead. I like zombies in zombie movies, but I don't necessarily like it when bands get back together after 20 years and do reunions. I'm not a big reunion fan. And besides the fact I sustained a lot of hearing damage from my years, 17 years of Oingo Boingo, and I would never, even one night on stage, I feel like I'd be taking 6 months off of my future hearing at this point. So that made it a real easy decision. When I finally left, I was leaving for good, that I got to hold on to what I have yet still to work with. So that made it. What was the other question?
Oh, we're going.
How many instruments? I don't play any instruments well. In the Mystic Nights, we were a multi-instrument band. So I played percussion, I played violin was my first, then I picked up guitar, and then I played trombone. And I could pick up any instrument and learn a couple of tunes on it really easily. But I've never practiced an instrument, and I never became good. So I would learn a difficult violin solo with the Mystic Nights, but I'd only learn 3 pieces. That's all I played on it. And with the trombone, I played early Duke Ellington music. I used to love that. So I played 4 or 5 Ellington pieces on the trombone, but that's all I could play on it. So I can't improvise on any instrument, and I don't consider myself a musician by a long shot. So I can get by on guitar. I compose on the keyboard, but like I say, I'm composing. I can't fluently play anything I've ever written. So like I said, I compose very methodically. I'm putting in one note at a time, one note at a time, one note at a time. So I'm really, I never was able to understand in my own life why I could work for 16 hours a day writing and be very disciplined about that, but I could never practice for an hour on any instrument. And it's just something about me and my wiring. I never could practice on an instrument.
And this young lady in the hat.
Hi. Can this works? Yeah. This is coming from a friend in Minnesota who she shares something with you on film. She showed me a score she did for you. Eventually. Or no, it was a film. Sorry. Anyway, she texted me this. What are your thoughts on Japanese film composer Yoko Kanno? She's been called the Danny Elfman of Japan.
Oh,
have you heard
wow.
of her? I haven't heard of her, so I can't.
It sounds like I should check this Yoko Kanno. Yoko Kanno. I actually don't know Yoko Kanno's work, so I'll go and investigate. That's why God invented IMDb, so we can quickly answer questions like these.
And we have one more question. I want to build up a lot of suspense so I can make as many people unhappy with this as I can. So it's gonna be this person who's jumping. See what jumping gets you?
Huge fan. I love you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing this. What is the deal with Beetlejuice 2? Because there was like some talk about that.
No one's ever
No one?
mentioned it to me. And they probably won't want to use me anyhow.
Okay.
If it's not with Tim, as far as I know. Let me
Okay.
put it that way, because he's never. But then again, I never know what Tim's thinking. So
I'm going to take a special bonus last question. Then.
Let's take three more. Three more.
3 more?
3 more.
Okay, 3 more. Who is magnanimous? You, sir, in the black shirt. Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you, Mr. Elfman. I had a music teacher who told me that music is a gift, so thank you for sharing your gift with us. And earlier you mentioned that you got into certain music situations by accident, and I actually got turned on to film scores by you by accident because I really loved the Batman movie, and I was looking to buy the Prince score, and I actually bought your score by accident, and it just
Victory.
Justice.
And it just opened this gateway to Williams and Horner and everything else for me. So I had some stuff back storage back east, and I asked my sister to send me the first soundtrack that I ever owned, which is your Batman soundtrack. I was wondering if you'd be so kind as to sign it for me.
Well, we'll work that out before I go.
Okay, thank
since
you.
that's your first score.
You're a gateway
earns it.
drug.
Yes.
You in the white shirt at the very back in the hat. See?
I have 2 quick questions. One of the few Tim Burton movies that you did not work on was Ed Wood.
Ed Wood.
And was there a reason that Tim didn't approach you for that?
No, I
or-
was actually on that. We just had a falling out. Things got pretty intense, and I think at some point, inevitably over a quarter century, we had to have like a moment, a nuclear meltdown, and that was our moment. And we used to joke that we'd end up like Bernard Herrmann and Alfred Hitchcock, who also had a nuclear moment, but never got back together. So I'm just grateful that after a year of not speaking to each other, we decided to speak to each other. And I got a message, would I ever talk to Tim again, from my agent, who's back there. And he said, I think so. And I was on a plane the next day for Kansas, where he was shooting Mars Attacks, and we met in a coffee shop and just decided never to speak of that previous year again. And we haven't. And we had no problems.
Cool. And you mentioned gateway drug. Have you ever considered composing?
What's the best one?
Have you ever considered composing true classical music rather than a film score? Because people say film scores are the gateway to classical music.
Well, I'm trying to write orchestral music. I wish I could every year, but I already have my next piece. You know, I've done 2 pieces for not film, or 3 with Iris, whatever. And So I know what I'd like to do next, and I wish I had time every year. It was my goal to do a non-film work every year, but unfortunately some years just doesn't leave me time to do that. So maybe every other year I can. But I love doing it, and I want to do more.
And you, sir, in the bright blue shirt? Finally.
A lot of your scores that you do with Tim Burton, kind of have a similar flavor to him. You have those like sweeping harmonic minor melodies over, the oompa sort of horns and stuff. And then you do stuff like Terminator 4, where someone gets the credits, they're like, "Whoa, that was Danny Elfman? What the hell just happened?" Do you find that like when you have to do something that kind of goes from that signature sound that you've developed that a lot of people here are familiar with, is that any harder, or is it like more liberating that you have more freedom to do something totally different?
No, it's definitely more liberating. My happiest moments are when somebody hears something and they didn't know it was me, and they find out it was me. That's great. So like when I did Good Will Hunting and Milk for Gus Van Sant, and every now and then I'll do something that somebody say, "Oh, I heard that. I had no idea that was you." That to me, that's my greatest compliment. So there's no way to get away from the fact that there's certain types of things I fall into, and of course with the same director on 15 films, there's going to be a certain level of repeat performance. You can't reinvent yourself every score 75 times and not have anything overlap in 75 scores, 75 hours of music, which is more or less what it comes to at this point. But I try, and I look for things that will let me stretch out when I can. I mean, that's why I did Next 3 Days with Paul Haggis last year. Not many people saw it, but I was really enjoying doing something that I wasn't normally asked to do, and every now and then I'm asked to do something that's not fantasy and not fantastic or not big, and I really appreciate those opportunities. I've been trying to claw my way down to low-budget films, for years now, and slowly I managed to get a few here and there, best I can.
One more, or
okay? Sure,
it's up to you.
Let's go.
We could go all night. Let's do one more.
Okay.
And I will say this guy in the pink shirt.
Glad I wore it. For lack of better words, how do you get your way when a director or producers say the score should go over here and you really feel it should be over here?
You don't get your way. The art of being a film composer is how to modulate what your instincts are with the directors. And every now and then you reach a point where you go, here's the line in the sand which I can't cross. But there's no way around the fact that if a director isn't into the piece of music you're writing, it won't end up in the movie. So really, often you have to be as much of a psychiatrist or a magician as you do a musician, because you're trying to conjure something and sell it. A big part of being a film composer is your ability to sell an idea and let the director share that and have them own it and become their own as well. You have to do that or it's useless. So if you're just stubbornly going to cling to something, you may have some good moments, but you're not going to last in the business. And yet, if you just do whatever they want, any way they want it, you'll sound like everybody else, and you may not have a great career either. So the trick is finding the balance to deciding where's the framework that you can work in, and knowing where you have to say goodbye or split, if something reaches a certain point. But then where you can find what do they really want, and how can I do it in a way that still pleases me. And most often that's what it comes down to. It's like, okay, I wrote a bunch of stuff, he's not responding, but I think I get what he wants, and I think I found a way to do it that still feels satisfying to me. And that's the trick. That's like the whole trick of this art. So that's a good question. Thank you.
We have one extra special bonus question.
All right.
Jamal Baldwin of Warner Brother Records would like to know who your favorite hip-hop artist is and who should he listen to.
No, I don't know.
Hopefully from the Warner Brothers catalog.
I'll tell you the problem when you listen to hip-hop on the radio. When you're listening to DJ sets, then there's an hour of a DJ spinning, you don't know what you're listening to most of the time. And often I'm trying to grab my iPhone and recording a little piece for something so I could try to find out what was that I just heard, because you know what it's like. 3 minutes, you're listening to something, and 5 minutes later, it's become something else. and they're not necessarily. You're listening to, like, you see the DJ's name on the bottom of the screen. It's not telling you who you're listening to. So I just know that there's a lot of really inventive stuff, and especially when it gets late at night, it gets better, and that's kind of where I turn for just like shaking my head up. But I would say 80% of the time, I think I may know who I'm listening to, but I'm not really sure. And I make a note to like check this piece out that I recorded at 1 a.m. on Saturday night, but I usually just don't. So I can't recommend anything other than there's good people out there spinning some good combinations of things, and I don't know how they do it, but there really is an art to that, and it's something I admire. So,
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. There are still soundtracks and CDs and these mighty box sets available at a special sale price at the Warner Brothers Boutique. And I want to thank Danny Elfman and Warner Brothers Records.
Thank you
for this
very
event.
much, everybody. Thank you.
Seriously, yeah.